All right. So you can wait. I see comments. Great. Perfect. So I guess in case. I think we're going to start.
All right.
So good evening, everybody. If you're watching live and if you're watching in the States, my name is David Kalhous. I'm the artistic director of the Prague Piano Festival, which is a festival that takes place in Prague, of course, every year. It did not happen last summer for obvious reasons, and that's one of the reasons why actually we are doing this webcast, because I just realized that this would be a wonderful way how to stay in touch with students and with faculty and with people who learn to love the festival and who have been coming, year after year, and who really feel this kind of void, because of the pandemic. We're still very much hoping that we will reconvene next summer if things. I'm really hoping that that's going to happen. But in the meantime, I had this idea that it would be really nice to produce and do a couple of webcasts with guests, with people who came to Prague, who were part of the festival, either as faculty or as guest artists. So, and I talked about this with my friend JIHYE, and who came to Prague last year for a very short trip, if I remember correctly. I think she was in London, and so things kind of aligned. So she was able to come for like a day and a half, right. Not even
26 hours or something like that.
Yes. I know, but it was great. She gave a wonderful presentation, and I really enjoyed having her there. So of course, because I have known JIHYE for 10 years, more than 10 years. Oh, 10 years. And we always talk in the evenings when we practice at Florida State, because that's where we both work. And so we kind of talk about students and about practicing and about music and in general. So she seemed to be like the natural first guest for this webcast. And not only that, then I had another idea that it's just a little bit too much work to do all the moderating by myself. So I asked JIHYE if she would be willing to moderate the following webcasts with me, which I think is going to be interesting because it will give people really different perspectives. Because I think sometimes when only one person is asking the questions, they just come from one place, like culturally, So I thought, having the guests, and having two people asking might actually be very interesting. And I don't think we're going to be just in the role of moderators. I think we're also probably going to contribute our ideas. So these are mostly conversations, among people, among pianists, talking about piano and related things. Okay, so since we have JIHYE here, welcome again. So she's in Tallahassee. I'm in New York. In normal times, I would probably be also in Tallahassee, so we would have been able to do this live. But this is the situation. But so I want to ask you first. You, of course, have a very interesting career as a musician. I'm kind of fascinated by your artistic journey, because you really are one of the more versatile people I know. Because I know the academics, and then I know the performers, right. and you're kind of in the middle. You teach. You're on the faculty of Brevard. You teach at Florida State. You have a busy private studio also, and then you also you of course also perform a lot. You have a really busy calendar. So I guess that's something I really want to ask you about. How you actually combine those things. So I know that you're Korean. You live in America, so you kind of live in both cultures. Linguistically, as well. You're an academic, you're a freelancer, you're kind of steeped in the traditional repertoire because that's what you played, as a young pianist, but you're also a really passionate advocate for new music. So you have a young child, but you keep a really busy career. So there are all these kind of things that I would like to kind of get into a little bit, in this conversation. And maybe the best way to do this would be to ask you kind of how it all started for you. playing the piano? Were your parents musicians? Did you have a piano at home? How was it being a budding pianist in Korea?
Right. So my mom had this idea that classical music was good for children to just listen to for brain development. So I think that was my first exposure. She had these cassette tapes that she would play at night. But then when I was 5, a neighbor moved in and she was a piano teacher. And so every day, I hear kids playing piano and someone was playing,
Obviously,
right? And I just loved that piece. And I'm like, I gotta play that piece.
it's a
So
good
I
piece.
asked my mom to, right? It is.
Hmm.
But then, so my mom, I asked her, I need to take lessons so that I can play the piece. And I think I was 4 or 5, somewhere there. And so I started taking lessons. But then I was not doing that for quite a while, and I was getting angry, like I'm doing Cherny, hot by air, and things like that. So I think I learned it myself actually. But then people started asking me to play that piece. Then I got tired of it a little bit. So that's how I got to start. And then I was good. I was in a small town. So for a
Hmm.
small town, I was too good to
Hmm.
continue there,
Yeah.
basically, from my teacher's perspective. So she wanted me to pursue it further by going to an art school that was in Seoul, the capital city, and that was 2 hours away from where I grew up. And so I guess I auditioned for a couple of teachers who would take me,
Hmm.
and three of them, I think, and then they all wanted to teach me. But I don't come from a very wealthy family, and in Korea, the classical music is a little bit costly. It takes a lot of money for paying for lessons and other things, and so they were all willing to teach me for free because they really
Hmm.
just wanted me to
Hmm.
do well with them. So I just connected with one of them better. So I started art school there and arts high school. And then I went to Seoul National University. So that's how it just went on to the more serious path.
Hmm.
Not
So,
because I wanted to do it, but it was just sort of like so circumstantial.
hmm, so you came from a small town and you ended
Right.
up in probably the best music school in Asia.
One of the, yeah, I
One
guess,
of the,
yeah.
well, it has a reputation. How was studying there? And I guess I'm asking because people always talk about the competitive aspect.
Yeah,
The bit between students. Between different studios, among different studios.
right.
How was working there? How
Well,
was studying there?
actually, I think the more intensive period for me was actually up to college. Of course,
Mm,
college, within the college experience, it was competitive and,
mm,
many talented students and teachers. But I think I just practiced so much before college because getting into college is so difficult and you don't get to choose different schools. Back then, it was just one school that you could audition for, so either you get
mhm,
in or not.
right.
So during the middle school, art school, and arts high school, I practiced 5, 6 hours every day.
Mhm,
And in elementary school too, I was a little obsessed with certain
right.
things. Like I remember,
Mm.
when I was learning that piece, I would wake up at 6 a.m. to practice that piece,
That's the way to do it.
right? When I was a fourth grader, I think.
Mm,
But anyways,
mm,
so Seoul National University is not only a good music school, but also a very good, just good university. So there
mhm,
were a lot of smart people who loved classical music. So I listened to a lot of music then. Like before college, I was focusing on my own thing, the piano solo stuff,
mhm,
but I started listening to more things then. And then within the studio, it was just always, who's doing what kind of thing. Is so
mhm,
and so doing this competition, that competition? But I think I try to stay away from that a little bit by just hanging out more with non-music majors.
mhm,
So the college experience was slightly different from the very intensive kind of prep years.
uh-huh,
But then things had to pick up during the third year and fourth year because I was preparing for the graduate recital and then
mhm,
thinking about what am I going to do after graduation?
Hmm.
And then eventually I decided to pursue it further in America.
Hmm. So I guess that would be my next question.
Yeah.
Coming to America, how was it for you? Not just musically. I mean, of course, you came to Indiana, which
Mhm.
was kind of again one of the meccas for pianists, in the states. I want to ask you about your teacher, but I guess I have a more general question about how was the adjusting coming to the US? Was it easy? Was it easy because there were more Koreans around you, or was it just not like that at
It
all?
was really, I think, the most difficult time of my life, actually,
Mm.
because I was never living alone before that point. I always had my mom. So,
Mm.
all of a sudden, I'm speaking foreign language. Um, my mom's not there to take care of me. So, I'm doing
Mm.
laundry and
Mm.
cooking, and then, hard to make friends and just sleepless nights. I remember recording lectures, every single lecture, just so that I don't miss with the teacher's permission. And then I would just repeatedly listen to the lectures
Uh-huh.
late night.
Right.
And then the teacher, I'll just go
Mm.
talk about the teacher too. The reason that I went to Indiana is because a couple reasons, Koreans care a lot about rankings. I don't know if you know, but
I'm
anyways,
aware.
right? So that year,
Yes.
I was checking,
Mm-hmm.
the magazines that rank schools, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
U.S. grad school for music school, I was checking,
Uh-huh.
and that year, IU was number one or two or something,
Uh-huh. Right.
one of the two.
Right.
And then at the same time, I had this wonderful pedagogy teacher during my senior year who talked about this professor at Indiana whose name was Georgie Shevok.
Mm-hmm.
He talked about him a lot. And then one day I realized one of my favorite CDs, which is the Gremio
Mm-hmm.
recording of especially the fourth movement of the Franck Sonata, that was with him.
Mm-hmm.
So I put this and
Yeah.
that together, and
Yeah.
I just thought I gotta go study with him. So I went.
Right.
But the thing is, I'm a foreign student who doesn't speak quite well the language, and everything is totally new. And Shebok's studio was like with the Pressler studio and Shebok studio, it was like the best kind of students would go to study with these teachers, and there were so many amazing, amazing pianists.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just a little bit shocked and a little
Uh-huh.
bit, and also IU is a big school,
Right.
so I'm like nobody
Mm-hmm.
in that big school. So I think that was a very big adjustment for me.
Uh-huh.
I was always somebody,
Mm-hmm.
in people
Yeah.
knew who I was, at least in the circumstance that I was in.
Right.
So that was a big change. But it was a great school with so many great faculty members, so many
Mm.
talented musicians. My friends from that time, they are like they are doing amazing things, like
Mm.
Concertmaster of Berlin
Yeah.
or I
Mm.
mean just everywhere in the world.
No.
So yeah, that's how I went there to study.
But that's interesting, because I'm thinking since this webcast is mostly for pianists, this is who is going to be watching this. Was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about Shibok and about his teaching, because I kind of I'm just so fascinated by the Hungarian school, because it's just you kind of look at the names and you think Andreas Schiff, Peter Frankl, Cifra, Geza Anda, Annie Fischer. It just goes on and on and on. And he kind of came from that generation, right? People who studied with Kodai and Dohnani,
Hmm.
and it's a very small country.
Right.
And suddenly, and they had this kind of explosion of talent, at some point, So I'm just wondering, was there anything specific about it that you could actually feel, oh yeah, this is kind of how this is kind of what Hungarian school is, or was it really,
Oh.
was he just like an idiosyncratic
It was,
pianist,
it's very hard to explain. First of all, it was a very short time for me because he
Mm-hmm.
suddenly had a cancer and he passed away after a year and a half
Yeah.
of me studying with him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think I was just not exposed to that kind of teaching. For example, he wouldn't talk a lot. He
Mm-hmm.
would demonstrate, and then
Mm-hmm.
somehow magically in the lesson, I could do things.
Uh-huh.
Like it was just more by watching him and trying to sort of do what he was doing, and then I would sound great. And
So he
then
wasn't really an analytical type. He was more like the old school kind of a professor who kind of sits down and plays.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't tell me a lot of detailed things. And then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes in the master class, he would talk about how, it's like a motion of a airplane over Switzerland mountain, or like
Mm-hmm.
stirring a soup pot,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
to talk about the upper arm
Mm-hmm.
weight, kind of this kind of movement.
Yeah.
So my memory of him is just very spotty. And I think because I was stressed with so many other things,
Uh-huh.
I just don't remember a lot of things, but I just remember how inspiring, because he was just such a beautiful person and beautiful
Mm-hmm.
musician.
Right.
And so that I think changed a lot in me, because after a year I went back to Korea and played for that pedagogy teacher that I liked very much. And
Mm-hmm.
she said, well, so I see what he's doing. Like he's
Yeah.
not explaining, he may not be explaining a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
you are a different pianist or something along that line. But
Mm-hmm.
he had this Japanese sort of like an assistant teacher figure, Reiko Nereki.
Uh-huh.
So whenever Shebak was away, she would teach his students.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think I learned a lot more details from her, because she would tell me things about agojik, or how to make rubato, or
Mm-hmm.
just a lot of how to use your arm and things like that came
Mm-hmm.
from her, not so much from him. But it might be different from other students, because
Uh-huh.
I don't think he did same thing for everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very interesting, because so as you were talking, because I worked with Peter Frankel at Yale, for a year and a half, and it was kind of similar in a way that I don't remember a lot about what he told me, but I do remember his playing,
Right.
and I do remember the particular sound on that particular piano, and and lots of the conversations were about, oh, I kind of like what you do, but maybe you should try this way,
Right. Yeah.
and so and sort of but it wasn't necessarily based on sort of what we would consider like the modern teaching methods, right? It's like the analysis of the score and or text. He didn't really care that much about it. I don't think these people who came from that school were not really steeped in those new
Yeah.
trends
Oh,
as
and I
much.
remember also, for
Mm,
example, in the second movement of Mozart piano concerto, he
mm,
would tell me to go listen to opera
right.
aria,
Hmm.
particular
Yeah.
duet, for
Hmm.
example,
Yeah.
or how some things are very sarcastic, like in the
Hmm.
second movement of Prokofiev, and
Mm,
then he would sort of show me a gesture kind of thing. It
right.
sort of sounds like this, and so
Mm,
these are the short memories that
hmm.
I have. And because I think I was almost afraid of him,
Hmm.
because he was such a figure that I admired, and I'm just like a little student who
Hmm.
just doesn't know a lot. So
Yeah.
I think it was just always like this kind
Yeah.
of in awe kind of
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is very interesting, and maybe we can get into these specifics later in the webcast. Maybe students
Right.
will also have some questions, because
Yeah.
I really find it fascinating. Just thinking about these kind of pianists of the past. Who didn't seem to kind of uh, who were not really talking to as much about details,
Hmm.
but a lot of that knowledge, what they did, came from just knowing an incredible amount of music,
That's right. Yeah.
and not just piano music,
Right.
but because they kind of live, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of that's what made them really interesting, but that's also what made them kind of harder to understand,
Right.
because they really didn't write, most of them, they really didn't write any books about it, or when you it's like when you read something that Arthur Schnabel wrote, it's kind of reminiscences. He doesn't give you a lot of ideas how do you actually play the Beethoven sonatas.
Right.
It all comes from I mean there was this person, and I knew Brahms when he was young, and we took walks, and so you kind of get into the music through these kind of stories, but somehow you kind of realize that it was a really, really different situation, because they were so much closer maybe to the source
That's
of
right.
the romantic repertoire,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
than
Oh, and
than
I
we
also
are.
now the memory just came up.
uh,
Something about the carnival, for example. I
mm,
was working
no.
on, and what is it? told me to think of a clown, walking into
Mm-hmm.
the arena, and then he's, stumbling up,
Mm-hmm. Right.
kind of funny, and then he's looking at beautiful girls and like,
Mm-hmm.
dreaming of,
Right.
I don't know, just falling in love with one of them or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, it gets,
Yeah.
and that's like, sadly, nobody is for me, or
Mm-hmm.
something like that.
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah.
That's the very,
Mm-hmm.
ironically sad and funny kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. So that's what he told me about
Mm-hmm.
that movement. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's very interesting. So that was when you started playing new music.
No, that
Oh.
was after Mr. Shebok. So then, after he
Uh-huh.
passed away, I studied with Reiko for a
Mm-hmm.
year and a half more. I just didn't know what to do because it was all of a sudden. So
Mm-hmm.
actually, I took 3 years for master's,
Mm-hmm.
and then I took 2 or 3 auditions for doctorate, but I decided to remain at IU.
The same.
Then I started studying with Edward Auer,
Mm-hmm.
who is a Chopin specialist. That is, he's wonderful with Chopin repertoire, and Schubert and Beethoven too. But he's the one who encouraged me to play new music,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't, yeah, that was because I got accepted at Tanglewood, and then they had this repertoire list that I could
Right.
pick
Right.
from.
Mm-hmm.
And so I showed it to him. Which one should I play? There were a
Mm-hmm.
lot of great pieces, and he told me,
Right.
I think you should play the Ligeti Horn Trio, because not a lot of people are gonna want to play it, but if you
Mm-hmm.
play it well, that will be good for you.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
he
see.
was correct. Yes, yeah. That was like such an amazing experience,
Mm-hmm.
learning it, performing it.
Uh-huh.
And then I think largely because I did a good job with that piece and other things, I guess, too, I got invited again to
Mm-hmm.
go second year.
Mm-hmm.
And then around the same time, I started also playing in New Music Ensemble,
Mm-hmm.
and then started playing a lot of the student
Uh-huh.
compositions. Yeah, so that's
Right.
how it began.
So that's how it began.
Yeah.
And so maybe we can talk a little bit more now, about some of your current projects, and we can also play some music, which is, we actually prepared a couple of pieces. So I'm wondering, people like that. I'm just looking at all the hearts blowing up. So I think maybe you should start about continuing 88 first, because that seems to be your biggest project, a very ambitious project, multi-year project.
Multi-year,
Yeah. Can you tell us something about it?
Sure. So it's called Continuum 88, and the name came from a good friend, violist Scott Rawls.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was telling him what it was about, my idea was to connect the past and the present and
Mm-hmm.
possibly the future. And then he said, yeah, so it's continuation, so continuum and
Yep.
88 piece. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how the name came. But it started as a bucket list checkoff, because I had so many pieces that I always wanted to play, but I never got to play.
Mm-hmm.
And then, once you get into a little bit of teaching and playing what other people ask you to play, I kept just not having time to play these pieces, like Chopin Preludes,
Mm-hmm.
Beethoven 110, Schumann Fantasy, things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I just listed all of them down and was
Mm-hmm.
thinking, how am I going to make a little more long-term project out of this? And then I thought, I play also a lot of new music, and I know a lot of composers, so I could, group them into a couple categories, and then ask composers to write a piece that would go with
Mm-hmm.
it. So then the first year was preludes, second year etudes, third year fantasy, and then I just did the miniatures and variations year, and then the COVID happened.
Right.
So the last year was going to be sonata.
Mm-hmm. I see.
That's going to be, I think, a year and a half later, because some other things came up. So that's how it began. And then the composers come from various places. Sometimes I meet people at a new music festival if I play a work by somebody that I like and keep in touch, and it could be that person. could be somebody who recommended by somebody else, and sometimes it's just an old friend or former teacher. So far 8 pieces have been written. Yeah. So the link that I sent you is one of them.
And so maybe we should play one of them, because we are almost 30 minutes into the podcast, so it might be nice to actually play something. So can you tell us something about the piece?
Yes. So this piece is by Peter Kramer, who came to FSU for one of the new music
festivals
as a guest composer. And my husband Ben Sang, I remember he was practicing something and I really liked it. And so I actually had to go bother him. Like, what is that piece? Who wrote it? And Peter was the composer. And he came and we became friends. And so when I talked to him about the project, he was very happy to write me something. He's a harpsichord player and the keyboard player. So he works a lot with the resonance of the piano. And I just like the beauty of the piece a lot. So that's Fantasy Stück by Peter Kramer.
Let's listen.
Yeah. Is it playing? Okay. You should play it. I think you would sound awesome with
It's a
this
beautiful, it's a
instrument.
beautiful piece. It's
Yeah,
it's a really really beautiful piece. Uh,
yeah.
yeah, no, I was just thinking, listening to it. There's always this question, and I don't play as much new music, as you do, because you're truly immersed, in new pieces, and uh, you actually ask, composers to write pieces for you, which I
Right.
don't very often do because that's a very dangerous thing to ask of a composer
It
because
is, yes.
suddenly you have more pieces than you can play in like 4 lifetimes. So and I always felt bad, telling no to people. But I'm just gonna ask a simple question: how can you tell whether a piece is good?
Many different things, I think. Well, because I play a lot of new music, by now, I can just glance through and play once or twice just at a sight reading level.
Mm-hmm.
I think if it has a lot of interesting substances that
Right.
attract me more than once,
Mm-hmm.
for me, that's a good piece.
Yeah.
Or it should have certain beauty. Like in this piece, there are a lot of beautiful moments,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not a terribly hard piece,
Mm-hmm.
but it creates something just so enjoyable. So either that,
Mm-hmm.
or it has to have some kind of pianistic, um, what is the word?
Yeah.
Satisfaction.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just based on my previous experience and what we
Right.
learn as good pieces. It has to have good structure, great musical ideas that just are put together really well, right? So I think that makes a good piece, and
Mm-hmm.
also not. Um, this is a little subjective, but not for like doing something for something's sake, like difficult for difficult sake, or special effect for special effect's sake, that kind of thing. I think it's very easy to see if the intention
Mm-hmm.
is not pure or good. So I like the
Mm-hmm.
pieces that have very nice, not nice, good, sincere intentions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm asking that question mainly because I remember this one episode that when I was practicing and you kind of banged on my door kind of angrily and you said, "Look at this piece. This is absolutely awful. Do you see the notation? It's just unbelievable, and so you remember. I mean, there's so many easier ways how to write this,
Right.
and you
Yeah.
kind of went on, and I think you had a point. So I'm also wondering, how much actually do you guide, especially young, inexperienced composers? Because that's something that people always ask. Especially pianists, young pianists. How do you
Right.
actually work with a living composer? Because sometimes pianists feel kind of shy to kind of to ask for corrections because they kind of because they're used to treating the score kind of
Right.
as
Revered.
something that that cannot be
Right.
changed, and they don't realize that very often actually it's kind of a work in progress. So I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if you have anything to actually to say about that, because I
Sure.
think it's important.
I think it really depends on your relationship with the composer. So, for example, if it's a composer that's coming as a guest to a music
Hmm.
festival and I'm playing
Yeah.
her or his piece, then I think I go with what's there first. But then if I have a question, like, what do you mean here
Hmm.
by putting these things
Hmm.
on the score? And
Hmm.
I think that's the best part of playing new music because you can actually have their answers.
Hmm.
Sometimes, composers are sometimes not sure of
Yeah.
what they write would achieve, what it would
Hmm.
actually achieve. So then that's what the rehearsal is for. And then
Hmm.
I have discovered if the composer is um, really good and just willing to work with a performer, you don't even have to worry about like, is that going to be okay for me to, if I say, this was a little bit hard to do and I've tried this and that, would it work if I did this? And then sometimes, the composer, I didn't even think about that, but that's awesome.
Hmm.
Let's do it.
Hmm.
That can happen too.
Right.
But so I've experienced something like that with, for example, my former teacher, who's a famous composer. She
Hmm.
is an important person, very,
Hmm.
very well known. But because our relationship was way back, I was comfortable enough to tell her, like, the jump is like 2 octaves,
Uh-huh.
but if I try it here, it would be much more secure and effect doesn't change too much. What do you
Right.
think?
Right.
That sort of thing is possible. With younger composers, I think I have learned actually, I easily assume sometimes the position of teacher, but I think that can be only helpful in that kind of context. For example, if I'm going as a guest composer, guest performer for a reading session, then that's what they expect me to do, right? So then they're absolutely happy if I suggest different kind of notations or moving the registers or getting rid of some unnecessary notes or keeping the pattern, things like that. Because I think sometimes young composers don't think pianistically, and also they change notes too frequently just to change. So I think when somebody who performs a lot of new music tell them, I think it might be much easier for the, because it's not just me who's gonna play, right? So
hopefully, yes.
Right, hopefully, that is always the hope. So it would make it so much easier and more willing for the performer to do it. So in that context, I think it is actually appreciated and expected.
Right.
And I think you just have to see how the composer is, because some of them are very protective of their stuff. So then you just have to just play what it is. But then, as I was saying, often really, sometimes the putting down the notes and putting down the instructions, it is not the perfect way of conveying your thoughts. So there's a lot of unspoken or cannot put down on the score kind of thing that you only get to meet when you work with the composer and you try a couple of things. Like, that's it. That's what I want to hear, kind of
right.
thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's been actually really great for me when I play older stuff. Because, again, what does this mean? What's written and what's not written.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I find these unexplainable things are about the sound, like the concept of the sound, of the instrument,
right.
that they just don't know sometimes how to express.
Right. Actually, you just started answering, my second question, because I was trying to kind of, flip the whole thing, and I ask you, how did playing new music really help you as a pianist? Because and I think the reason I'm asking you, I think from my personal experience, I started playing new music when I was, in my really mid-20s. I was kind of trained very, very classically, and it wasn't until I came to Chicago and I went to Northwestern when I started actually working with composers. And I do remember, and sort of what I want to put out here are just actually two views which I find both interesting. I remember speaking with a member of the Chicago Symphony who actually was coaching my group, and I kind of asked him, how was it, and he was there at a time, when Boulez was one of the conductors, and they were doing a lot of, especially European modernism and Carter and difficult music, So I was asking him, how was the experience doing that? Do you feel like this is something that people enjoy in the orchestra? And he said, not always, but the orchestra sounds so much better now when they actually started playing unusual things, because their technical abilities and their sound capabilities just expanded amazingly, and I think so he said, well, of course, there were great musicians there, so they could do it, but just kind of learning difficult music actually helped them play traditional music better. In that sense. So there was that. And so on the other hand, I'm sort of reading these interviews with people like Andras Schiff or Mari Peraya, and they always get these questions, oh, why don't you play new music, right? And they say, well, I am interested in new music, but I'm so kind of steeped and attuned to the tonal language that I feel like, if I started doing something else, it will just destroy completely what my musical personality is about. So that wasn't really a question, but actually it is a question, So where do you, how do you see this? Do you feel, because you said that actually, playing new music actually help you with your sound.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's always one thing, and so I was wondering, because I always feel that there's a lot of freedom in your playing. Whenever I hear you play new music or traditional music, you always do something that I would never think of. And and that's sort of, that's sort of how you, when you listen to Schnabel or when you listen to Leszczycki, when those people, you suddenly hear, I mean, where did that come from? So I feel like, people, again, play with more freedom because they were, again, more confident in that language. And I think now what happens is that a lot of conservatory students feel like, they're presented with the score and they get to play this Beethoven sonata and they have to practice it for a year,
Right.
and it just becomes like something immutable. They feel like, they cannot change. So anyway, I should stop talking, but I'm wondering, if you have any questions on that, and how people, what do you think people gain from performing new music?
I think
Pianists.
just the understanding of the score is what you can gain
Mm-hmm.
from playing new music, and then also
Yeah.
just the learning ability, as you
Mm-hmm.
were actually saying, learning something in a very limited time period, because that's the situation with a lot of new music.
Right.
So processing of information
Mm-hmm.
with the set time, I think that's something that I learned by doing
Mm-hmm.
a lot of new music. And then
Mm-hmm.
the how would I say it? Not just something to do with making a good shape of a product
Mm-hmm.
in a very short time. I
Right.
think that's a good skill that you can learn from playing a lot of new
Mm-hmm.
music. But I've never thought about the tonal center mind and
Mm-hmm.
understanding of that. Totally different from playing new music, because good new music has its own language.
Right.
That's, I think, back to your earlier question.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a good piece of music. It will
Uh-huh.
have its own harmonic
Right.
languages
Mm-hmm.
and technical relations, and
Mm-hmm.
your understanding of a piece as a whole, I don't
Mm-hmm.
think it's that different. And also on top
Right.
of that, I teach a lot of music theory.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big part of my
Mm-hmm.
playing. I
Yeah.
understand from the theoretical,
Mm-hmm.
analytical kind of view.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So when I'm surprised to hear, because I never hear my playing and think, oh, that was too free or something. I often think like, hey, that's very like too simple sometimes. But anyways, when I do something like taking time or whatever, that has to have a reason
Mm-hmm.
from my understanding, theoretical understanding, if it's a tonal music, and then structural direction and importance, which part weighs more, that kind of thing. So that's a big part of how I approach. So yeah, but that's interesting. I never thought that they were so separated.
Well, it's almost like, you have poets, saying that, oh, I never want to learn a new language, because if I started speaking a new language, that would kind of, pollute my language.
That is,
And it's so it's something like that, and I think, I'm thinking more in sort of, in the way you do, just because we both, came to America from different linguistic backgrounds, so it's also, you're kind of, you're constantly adapting as a human being, and as you said, kind of, learning non-tonal music is basically learning a new language. And it just seems like, especially nowadays, for young pianists, who are really trying to kind of understand and kind of, get the scope of piano music, being fluent in more languages on the piano is really important.
right. Yeah.
But
the speaking different language and writing and beautifully in one language, that's a different thing. And I don't quite feel that kind of separation in my musical understanding of the tonal music and the non-tonal things. I guess it's because I played the tonal stuff long enough, and then not like long like Andras Schiff or
right.
or a Pariah, because they probably played only that for 50, 60 years. But I did that for like 20 years, and then something else sort of came along. So
well, and also you play new music all the time, so for you it's not unusual.
Right, that's my like second language kind of.
That's your second language. Well, I think we need to do a webcast on new music, because we could probably keep we could keep talking about this, for hours. But we should probably, because we don't have that much time left, and I think we should maybe, whoever is watching, and I'm not quite keeping track, but if people have any questions, this is a good time to actually type some of them. So maybe we should listen to another piece to kind of break it up a little bit. What would you like to what would you like me to play?
What else did I send you? There is an etude, and then the other one is the fragments of light. Or
Yes, the fragments of light, the five fingers, and I think that's it. So we can pick one.
Maybe the five fingers. Let's
Because
listen to
yeah,
variation.
that may be a nice contrast. Okay, I'll do that. That's a great piece.
Right?
That's a great piece. I think it's like a strange amalgam of Debussy and minimalist music and a little bit of ligeti, and there's so much in that piece.
Yes, yeah. So I paired that piece in one of the Continuum 88 concerts. So I started with
Hmm.
the cherry,
Right,
and
right.
and then I think I played this one, and then I did the
Hmm.
Debussy, and then I did the Ligeti fanfares
Hmm.
as the like scale
Yeah.
pattern kind of thing. Yeah, but so that was by JIHYE, Korean composer.
Hmm.
She writes great piano stuff, really,
Hmm.
and she herself plays piano very well.
Hmm.
So another piece by her that I play more often than that etude is Dorami Variation. So it's a do re mi, that's the theme, and then it's a set of variations. So anyways, so her piece, the do re mi variations, I play in another project that I do. I mean, I have too many ideas and too many things, but one of them is this women composers, living women composers
Right.
works that I played in February, and then also a little bit last week, and so yeah, that's the composer. But I'm glad
Right.
you liked it. Yeah, and it was written for a piano competition for high school.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
That actually makes a lot of sense. It's sort of it's the kind of music that that's seem to be written at the piano. Because the like the tactile aspect of it, is just so it's like ligeti etudes, in a way.
Right. Yeah.
You really feel like it just fits the instrument so well, and there's this kind of physical joy of playing the
Yes,
piece,
and
right?
that's the satisfaction I was talking about.
Right. Yeah.
Playing her piece is very, ooh, this feels awesome. It's like when you play Mendelssohn.
Hmm.
So it's a little bit of work, but good work.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, you have, as you said, many different projects, and we're of course running out of time as we always do. But I thought maybe if you could tell us at least briefly. So you have the project about where you do music and pictures,
That's
which is
right.
working with younger kids. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about in a few sentences what it's about?
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite things. it means a lot to me. It's so the title is Music in Pictures, and it began 10 years ago. This is our 10th year actually, with the support from the Rosemary Beach Foundation that's in Rosemary Beach, Florida. And my good friend Winky, she's a beautiful person who just loves classical music, and she just wants more beauty in the world. So she just created this program. So she supports it, and she wanted to bring classical music to classroom of K to 12 graders in Walton County. So that's around Rosemary Beach. So sometimes I go, sometimes Ben goes, and FSU students have been visiting those schools too. So each year we pick 3 to 4 pieces, classical music, and they will create artwork while listening to as a response to these works. And so then it becomes a competition. They have judges and they pick pieces from each grade. It's a very big festive thing, and the reason it means so much to me is because a lot of these kids, they don't know what classical music is. They've never seen a pianist or a piano, and they tell me things like, my dad just lost a job and I want to just show him this video because it was so beautiful, like the most beautiful thing I've ever heard, or something like that. I mean, it just touches you in such a different way. It's a different experience for me, and I think it's very meaningful to do, just to go to different places. And in a way, for me, it's like among the things that I do, this might change actually somebody's life. I can change somebody's life also by teaching techniques, right? That's very important too. But this one is on a different level, just very, I just love doing it and meeting a lot of kids. I mean, I've met hundreds of kids that way, and they're very sometimes huggy, and but this year we can't do that, right? So I've been doing a lot on teams actually. I hate teams, but anyways, so it's been working out great. So that has been very nice that we could at least do it virtually. Yeah.
That's really beautiful, because I've been thinking our education, again, as musicians, as pianists, because we both went to conservatories, and the focus is so much on the instrument and on sort of being a pianist and doing competitions, and you live kind of in this world, and you're somehow like brought up assuming that everybody loves classical music and everybody goes to concerts and everybody wants to discuss the best performance of the Paganini variations, but which is of course not true.
Too, right?
It's a lot of fun, but you, of course, especially in a place like a smaller place in America, you need to start somewhere else. You can't really go there with kind of these specific kind of highbrow ideas. So you don't really talk down to people, but you kind of bring music in a way that actually is appealing and that sort of stimulates creativity.
Right. And also I play often new music for these kids, because they don't have any preformed concepts or prejudice. They love it. If it's good new music, they respond right away. And then their reactions to a lot of just great music out there is similar to how, in a way, they are supposed to react. So it's really amazing to see how humans just have this intuition kind of built in, even if you don't know much. You actually hear something good and you recognize it, even without pre-exposure. So that's something I really enjoy seeing.
So what about music and motherhood, your other project?
That's the last thing that
that's the last thing.
Not last thing, because there are some new things that I'm doing. But that came to my mind when just I had a baby. He's now 7 years old, almost 8. But the first year was really hard for me because there was nobody to talk to, or my family's in Korea, and the physical change and the tiredness, lack of sleep, pain here and there. I couldn't lift my son anymore after a couple months, and I decided, okay, it hurts my feelings that I cannot do it, but I shouldn't. Things like that. But then really seriously, there's not much information out there. And I think there are some mom groups kind of thing on Facebook, but I'm not a big fan of just random information out there like that. So I started interviewing other musicians who are mothers, and just they were so generous in sharing their own experiences. So it could be anything from physical changes to actually the professional challenges. You know, some people don't want to hire a pregnant person or a mother. You know, they assume just like things on their own. Something like that, or when is a good time to start playing again, or what kind of repertoire should you choose, all sorts of things that need to be discussed more openly. And so I had this in my mind for a while, and I had the video clips, but never had time to actually make a video. So Corona time was great for that. I finally could edit and put some clips on my YouTube channel.
Yeah. No, I mean, I saw the clips, and I think it really is very meaningful, and I'm sure that we'll have guests who are actually in a similar position, So I hope we'll be discussing this a little bit more detail because I think it is important, it really is important, the fact that we need more women in arts, and I think there are lots of women in arts, but they are somehow still not able to do what they would like to do just because.
And the understanding is totally lacking what we are going through, and then also the support system or the resources.
Right.
I think there should be a book about all the things that you need to consider as a musician when you become a mom, but even not as a musician, just like serious lack of information about being a mom.
Right.
Lots of information about how to raise your baby, but not about the mothers themselves. So that was my intention.
Well, and I really kind of admire, because I have been there, because our kids are the same ages, so we kind of we did, we used to compare notes, about lack of sleep and how is it to play a concert on 3 hours of sleep, and we'll be asking our other guests about this too, how they deal with it, because this is very important. JIHYE, I think we'll need to conclude slowly because unbelievably it's been an hour. I know. So I see. There are a couple of questions, and I think what I'm going to do, I'm just gonna send them to you, and maybe you can answer to people. You can answer a little bit later. I think there is a question from Erica. I see a couple, but yes. So we can look at it sometimes. Maybe next time. And I think some of these topics that we have been discussing will actually come back, in one way or the other. So JIHYE, thank you very much for coming.
Yeah.
And for
you're not gonna answer because I see some questions.
Yes, but I think we said it's going to be an hour, and I'm afraid they're gonna cut us off. If they haven't already. So this is the first webcast, and I'm slightly disorganized, and that's why you're coming on board, because we're gonna make sure that we can keep track. But in your situation there is really so much to talk about, and I'm really happy we're able to actually touch on kind of each one of those topics that that you're involved in, and maybe in the following webcast we can really talk to students more also, what students should do, during this COVID crisis, because it's not easy for anybody. And I think, people are having doubts about what does it mean to be a performer? What does it mean? What does it mean to be?
Really, what does it mean to?
Why are we learning these long sonatas if there is nobody who wants to listen to them? So I hope it's not a great time to be a musician, but I think through conversation and through kind of sharing of ideas, we can probably at least keep ourselves entertained, and somehow kind of understand that we're all in this together.
Right, and just stay connected and inspire each other, because it's always, I think, easier if you talk to other musicians who think alike. So I'm so glad you invited me. And
yes, and so we don't know when the next webcast is going to be. We're working on it, but this will be also posted on the Prague Piano Festival YouTube channel. So you're welcome to watch it anytime. If you have questions, write to us as well. And I will also list all the clips that we played, you know, and of course JIHYE's website has a lot of information and all the music. Okay, JIHYE, thank you very much for coming, and
So much for
and
having me.
and thank you very. I don't know how many people even came, but you know I'm
Right,
really
I don't
happy. I think some people came, which is great, and I hope more people are going to watch it later. So, please tell your friends, you know, especially if you are students, you know, tell your colleagues about this, and maybe also write to us. What do you want us to talk about?
Right.
Because that's important, because sometimes, you know, we as musicians become a little bit too self-indulgent, you know, and we talk about things, so we don't really know if all the things that we talk about interest you. So because we can always talk on the phone about some of these things, you know, but we really want to kind of create some kind of a connection, not just, you know, with people who are associated with the festival, but, you know, with kind of, you know, broader pianistic community. JIHYE, thank you very much. Again, I'm David Kalhous, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.